The gunshot echoed across the valley, just as Olivia Morgan realized she had made the worst mistake of her life. She stood frozen in her ivory wedding dress, one hand protectively curved around her swollen belly, the other clutching a bouquet of wilting wildflowers as jeers and whispers swept through the small wooden church of Verde, Nevada. "Whore," someone hissed from the back pews. It was 1875, and Olivia had believed in promises. 6 months ago, Jeremiah Blackburn had sworn he loved her. 2 months ago, when she'd tearfully confessed her condition, he'd grudgingly offered marriage. Today, at the altar of the only church in Verde, he was humiliating her before the entire town. "Did you really think I'd raise another man's bastard?" Jeremiah sneered, his handsome face twisted with contempt as he fired another shot into the ceiling. "I only proposed so you wouldn't run off with your secrets. The whole town deserves to know what you are." Olivia trembled, tears streaming down her face. "It's yours, Jeremiah. I've never been with anyone else." "Liar," he roared, his face flushed with whiskey and rage. "Everyone knows you've been spreading your legs for the church doors slammed open." Sunlight poured in, silhouetting a tall figure standing in the doorway. Dust motes danced around him as his spurs jingled against the wooden floor with each deliberate step. "That's enough." The voice was low, controlled, but carried throughout the stunned church. Jeremiah swung his pistol toward the newcomer. "This ain't your business, Keegan. Get out." Keegan Elliott stepped into the light, his weathered face set in stone beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His eyes blue as a mountain lake never left Jeremiah's as he walked steadily up the aisle. "I'm making it my business," he said. Unlike most men in Verde, Keegan didn't wear flashy clothes or carry fancy guns. His simple denim and cotton were stained with honest work, his revolver worn but well-maintained. "You won't speak to her like that." Olivia stared at him in shock. Keegan Elliott had barely spoken 2 words to her in the year she'd lived in Verde, though she'd seen him often enough at the general store where she worked. He was the foreman at the Triple R Ranch outside town, quiet, respected, and utterly unexpected in this moment. "You defending her honor, Elliott?" Jeremiah laughed bitterly. "Too late for that. She's already carrying your child," Keegan interrupted. "And you know it." A murmur swept through the church. Pastor Wilson, who'd been cowering behind his pulpit, finally found his voice. "Mr. Blackburn, perhaps we should—" "Shut up, old man," Jeremiah growled, his gun hand trembling. "You don't know anything about her." "I know enough," Keegan said, now standing just 10 feet from Jeremiah. "I know you bragged to the boys at the saloon about betting her. I know you promised her marriage. And I know you're a coward who'd rather shame an innocent woman than face your responsibilities." Jeremiah's face contorted with rage. "You calling me a liar?" "I'm calling you a disgrace," Keegan replied evenly. The church went deadly quiet. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the standoff, one hand still protective over her unborn child. She'd never exchanged more than pleasantries with Keegan Elliott. Yet here he stood, defending her when no one else would. Jeremiah's finger tightened on the trigger. You ought to leave," Keegan cut in. "Now, before you do something that'll get you killed or hanged." Something in his tone, not fear, not anger, but absolute certainty, made Jeremiah hesitate. His eyes darted around the church, finding no allies in the shocked faces of the congregation. "Fine," Jeremiah spat finally. "Take the whore. She's damaged goods anyway." He holstered his pistol with shaking hands. Keegan's expression never changed, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Apologize to the lady," Jeremiah laughed. "Go to hell." Faster than anyone could follow, Keegan closed the distance between them. His fist connected with Jeremiah's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed through the church. Jeremiah sprawled across the altar steps, blood trickling from his split lip. "Apologize," Keegan repeated, standing over him. Jeremiah glared up, hatred in his eyes, but the fight had gone out of him. "Sorry," he muttered. "Not to me, to her." Jeremiah turned his venomous gaze to Olivia. "Sorry," he said again, no sincerity in his voice. "Now get out," Keegan said. "And if I ever hear you speaking about Miss Morgan again, our next conversation won't be so civilized." Jeremiah scrambled to his feet, backing away. He cast one last hateful glance at Olivia before stalking out, slamming the church doors behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia stood trembling, acutely aware of dozens of eyes on her, judging her, pitying her. She'd never felt so alone in her life. Then Keegan turned to her, his stern expression softening. "Miss Morgan," he said quietly, removing his hat, "I apologize for the interruption." A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat, but she swallowed it down. "I believe the ceremony was already thoroughly interrupted, Mr. Elliott." He nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Then, to her absolute astonishment, he dropped to one knee before her. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice carrying through the silent church, "I know we barely know each other. I know this is sudden and strange. But I'd be honored if you would consider marrying me instead." Gasps and whispers erupted throughout the church. Olivia stared down at him, certain she must have misheard. "Mr. Elliott, you don't have to. I know I don't have to," he said softly. "I want to. That child deserves a father who will protect it, and you deserve a husband who will honor you." Olivia's mind raced. Keegan Elliott was offering her salvation not just from this moment of humiliation, but from the life of shame and hardship that awaited an unwed mother in 1875. Yet he was practically a stranger. "Why?" she whispered, searching his face for ulterior motives. "Because it's the right thing to do," he answered simply. Then, even softer, so only she could hear, "And because I've watched you for months, too shy to speak, admiring your kindness to every person who walks into that store, no matter how they treat you. I know your character, Miss Morgan, even if I don't know your favorite color." Tears filled her eyes again, but different tears now. "It's blue," she said softly. He smiled, a real smile this time, transforming his weathered face. "Mine too." Olivia looked around at the shocked faces of the townspeople who had been ready to watch her disgrace just moments ago. Then she looked back at Keegan, still kneeling patiently before her. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will marry you, Mr. Elliott." He stood, relief washing over his features. Then, surprising her again, he turned to Pastor Wilson. "Pastor, if you're willing, I'd like to proceed with a wedding. Different groom, same bride." The pastor fumbled with his Bible, clearly flustered. I suppose if Miss Morgan is certain." "I am," Olivia said, her voice stronger now. And so, with the town of Verdi still watching in stunned silence, Olivia Morgan married Keegan Elliott less than 10 minutes after being abandoned at the altar. No romance, no courtship, just a desperate leap of faith, and the strange, sudden knowledge that this quiet cowboy might be the answer to prayers she hadn't even known to make. As they walked out of the church into the bright Nevada sunshine, now husband and wife, Olivia wondered what kind of marriage could possibly grow from such beginnings. But when Keegan gently helped her into his wagon, his strong hands careful and respectful, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. The ride to Keegan's ranch was quiet. Olivia sat stiffly beside her new husband, still wearing her wedding dress, her mind struggling to grasp the dramatic turn her life had taken in less than an hour. The sprawling landscape of Nevada territory stretched around them, sagebrush plains rising to distant mountains, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. I've got a small house, Keegan said finally, breaking the silence. Nothing fancy, but it's solid. Built it myself when I became foreman. How long have you worked at Triple R? She asked, grateful for the mundane conversation. 7 years. Came out here from Missouri after the war, needed open sky. He glanced at her. You're from back east, aren't you? Pennsylvania, she nodded. My father died in the war. Mother and I lost everything. We came west for a fresh start 2 years ago. She swallowed hard. She passed last year from fever. I'm sorry, he said simply. Another silence fell, but somehow less uncomfortable than before. Mr. Elliott Keegan, he corrected gently. I reckon you ought to call me by my given name now. Keegan, she tried again. I need to know something. What you said about Jeremiah, about him bragging. Was that true? His jaw tightened. Yes, in the saloon, drunk. Talking about how he'd convinced a proper lady to. He stopped, obviously uncomfortable repeating the crude details. I'm sorry, I should have said something sooner, maybe warned you somehow. You couldn't have known I'd. She placed her hand protectively over her belly. No, he agreed. I couldn't have. They crested a rise, and suddenly a ranch spread out before them, not as grand as some, but substantial. A solid 2-story house stood amid several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. In the distance, cattle grazed on the spring grass. It's beautiful, Olivia murmured. It's not mine, he clarified. Triple R belongs to the Rosewood family, but that, he pointed to a smaller but well-built cabin set apart from the main house. That's ours. Ours. The word hung in the air between them. As they approached, a tall man with graying hair stepped out onto the porch of the main house. His eyebrows rose at the sight of Olivia in her wedding dress. That's Mr. Rosewood, Keegan explained. Good man. Fair boss. He helped Olivia down from the wagon with careful hands, then nodded to his employer. Mr. Rosewood, sir, this is my wife, Olivia. Wife. Another word that made her head spin. Richard Rosewood approached, studying them both with shrewd eyes. Wife. When you left this morning, you weren't even courting Elliott. It's a long story, sir, Keegan replied. I imagine it is. The older man's gaze lingered on Olivia's midsection, but his expression remained neutral. Well, Mrs. Elliott, welcome to Triple R. I trust your husband will make you comfortable. Thank you, sir, Olivia managed. Rosewood nodded, then turned back to Keegan. Take the rest of the day, Elliott. I expect you'll have some settling in to do. We'll manage the evening routine without you. Thank you, sir. As Rosewood walked away, Keegan led Olivia toward their cabin. It stood beneath 2 large cottonwood trees with a small garden plot beside it. He hesitated at the door. I should carry you over the threshold, he said awkwardly, if that's all right. The formality of it, after everything that had happened, almost made Olivia laugh. But she nodded, and he carefully lifted her into his arms, mindful of her condition, and carried her into what would now be their home. The interior was simple but clean. A main room combined kitchen and living areas, with a cast iron stove, a wooden table with 4 chairs, and a comfortable-looking armchair near the fireplace. 2 doors led off the main room. Bedrooms through there, Keegan said, setting her gently on her feet and nodding to one door. Spare room through the other. I was using it for storage, but he cleared his throat. It'll make a fine nursery. The reality of their situation crashed over Olivia again. She was married to a man she barely knew, carrying another man's child, in a house she'd never seen before today. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice trembling. What you did today. You don't need to thank me, he interrupted gently, or feel beholden, this marriage. He seemed to search for the right words. It can be whatever we need it to be. I won't expect anything you're not ready to give. Relief washed through her, followed by an unexpected pang of something like disappointment. So this is a marriage in name only. For now, he said carefully, until we know each other better, until that little one arrives and things settle. He hesitated. Olivia, I meant what I said in the church. I admire you, have for some time. I think we could build something real given time, but I won't rush you. His honesty was disarming. I'd like that, she admitted softly. A chance to build something real. He smiled that same transformative smile from the church, and for the first time, Olivia noticed how handsome he was. Not in Jeremiah's flashy, obvious way, but in a steadier, deeper manner that spoke of character rather than mere appearance. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I can make us something simple." "I could cook," she offered. "It's the least I can do," he shook his head. "Not today. Today you rest. You've been through enough." He hesitated. "Though you might want to change." "I don't know much about ladies' clothing, but that dress doesn't look comfortable for sitting around the house." Olivia looked down at her wedding dress, the dress she'd sewn herself with such hope and care, and felt a sudden, powerful urge to be free of it. "Yes, I'd like to change. My things. We'll get them from town tomorrow," he promised. "For tonight, I might have something that would work." He disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a soft flannel shirt and a pair of suspenders. "The shirt should be big enough to accommodate," he said, gesturing vaguely toward her belly. "And the suspenders can hold up a pair of my trousers if you roll up the legs. Not proper ladies' wear, I know, but it's perfect," Olivia said, taking the clothes gratefully. "Thank you." He showed her to the bedroom and left her alone to change. The room was simple but pleasant, with a large bed covered in a hand-stitched quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small mirror. As she struggled out of her wedding dress, she caught her reflection pale, with tear-streaked cheeks, her dark blonde hair falling from its careful arrangement. "What have you done, Olivia Morgan?" she whispered to herself. Then corrected. "Elliott, Olivia Elliott now." The name felt strange on her lips, but not unpleasant. She slipped into Keegan's flannel shirt, which was indeed large enough to accommodate her 5-month pregnancy. The fabric was worn soft from many washings and carried a faint scent of pine and leather that she found oddly comforting. She rolled up the sleeves and then struggled into the trousers, using the suspenders to hold them up over her swollen belly. The result, when she looked in the mirror again, was absurd. Yet somehow she felt more herself than she had in the elegant wedding dress she'd created for a marriage built on lies. When she emerged from the bedroom, Keegan was at the stove, cooking something that smelled delicious. He turned at her approach, and his eyes widened momentarily before crinkling at the corners. "I'm sorry," she said, gesturing at the ridiculous outfit. "I must look a sight." "You look beautiful," he said simply, then immediately turned back to the stove, a flush creeping up his neck. The sincerity in his voice warmed something inside her. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Olivia felt something other than fear or shame. She felt seen. They ate a simple but hearty meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread, talking cautiously about neutral topics: the ranch, the changing season, the town of Verde. As darkness fell, Keegan lit oil lamps that cast a warm glow throughout the cabin. "I'll take the armchair tonight," he said as they finished washing the dishes together. "You have the bed." "I can't put you out of your own bed," she protested. "Our bed," he corrected gently. "And you're not putting me out. I'm choosing to give you space. We have time, Olivia." "No need to rush anything." She nodded, grateful yet again for his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Keegan, for everything." "No need for thanks between husband and wife," he said, his deep voice soft in the lamplight. That night, as Olivia lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, she placed her hands on her swollen belly and felt her child move. For the first time, the movement brought joy instead of anxiety. Whatever strange path had led her here, she had the sense that she and her baby might have found a safe harbor after all. In the main room, Keegan shifted in the too small armchair, wondering at the turn his life had taken. He'd admired Olivia Morgan from afar for months, finding excuses to visit the general store just to exchange a few words with her. He'd been crushed when he'd heard of her engagement to Jeremiah Blackburn, a man he'd known was unworthy of her. But never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that by nightfall she would be his wife, sleeping in his bed, carrying a child he would raise as his own. "What have you done, Keegan Elliott?" he whispered to himself in the darkness. Yet despite the strangeness of it all, despite the challenges that surely lay ahead, he felt a sense of rightness that had eluded him for years. Whatever happened next, he knew he would never regret the choice he'd made today. The following weeks brought a series of adjustments as Keegan and Olivia learned to navigate their unusual marriage. True to his word, Keegan had retrieved Olivia's belongings from the small room she'd rented in town. The landlady had been coldly disapproving, clearly having heard about the scandalous events at the church. "Decent folk don't appreciate such spectacles," the woman had sniffed as Keegan loaded Olivia's trunk into his wagon. "Decent folk don't gossip about a lady in difficult circumstances," he'd replied evenly, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness before driving away. Word of their hasty marriage spread quickly through Verdi. Some viewed it as a romantic gesture. Others saw it as proof of Olivia's supposed impropriety. Keegan ignored the whispers, but Olivia felt them acutely whenever they went into town. "Hold your head high," Keegan advised as they walked into the general store where Olivia had once worked. "You've done nothing to be ashamed of." Mr. Jenkins, the store owner, greeted them with obvious discomfort. "Mrs. Elliott," he said, the new name awkward on his tongue. "I've been meaning to speak with you about your position here." "I understand if you no longer wish to employ me," Olivia said quietly, one hand resting on her now visibly pregnant belly. "Given my condition and the circumstances," Jenkins fidgeted with his spectacles. "Well, now, it's not that exactly, but the customers, you see. Some of the ladies have expressed concern about propriety." Keegan's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Olivia lifted her chin. "I understand, Mr. Jenkins. Thank you for the opportunity you gave me. I wish you well." As they left the store, Keegan's hand gentle at the small of her back, he murmured, "You handled that with more grace than he deserved." "It's not unexpected," she replied, though the rejection stung. "An unwed mother is scandalous enough, one who changed grooms mid-ceremony." She shook her head. "I'm afraid I've made myself quite the topic of conversation." Keegan corrected. "We've made ourselves the topic, and they'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." As they walked down Verdi's main street, Olivia acutely conscious of the stares and whispers, they passed the town's small dressmaking shop. Mrs. Wilson, the pastor's wife, was just leaving with a package under her arm. She stopped abruptly at the sight of them. "Mrs. Elliott," she said, her voice cool but not unkind. "I hope you're settling well into married life." "I am, thank you," Olivia replied politely. Mrs. Wilson's eyes dropped to Olivia's midsection, then back to her face. "If you're in need of work, I believe Mrs. Henderson at the dressmaker's is looking for someone skilled with a needle. I mentioned to her that your wedding dress showed considerable talent." Olivia blinked in surprise. "That's very kind of you." The older woman nodded. "The Lord teaches forgiveness and new beginnings, my dear. Not everyone in Verdi has forgotten that." With a nod to Keegan, she continued on her way. "Well," Keegan said as they watched her go, "seems you have at least one ally in town." "It appears so," Olivia murmured, touched by the unexpected support. They stopped at the dressmaker's shop on their way back to the ranch. Mrs. Henderson, a plump, practical woman in her 50s, looked Olivia over with an appraising eye. "Mrs. Wilson says you've got talent with a needle," she said without preamble. "I need help with alterations and finishing work." Hours would be mornings only, 3 days a week. Pays fair, not generous. Interested? "Very much so," Olivia said, hope rising in her chest. "Though I should mention I'm expecting in about 4 months." Mrs. Henderson waved a hand dismissively. "Had 4 of my own." "Just means you'll need a stool to rest your feet. Can you start Monday?" And so, against all expectations, Olivia found herself with a new position in town. The work was precisely the kind she enjoyed: detailed handwork that allowed her mind to wander while her fingers stayed busy. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a fair employer who cared more about the quality of Olivia's stitches than the circumstances of her marriage. Meanwhile, life at the cabin settled into a comfortable rhythm. Keegan continued sleeping in the armchair despite Olivia's protests about his discomfort. Each morning, he rose before dawn to begin his duties at the ranch. Each evening, he returned to share a meal with her, gradually opening up about his life before Verdi. She learned he had grown up on a small farm in Missouri, the middle son of 5 children. He'd fought for the Union in the war, returning home to find his father dead from illness and the farm struggling. "My older brother was married by then, taking over the farm," he explained one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Younger brothers were still in school. I felt extra, unnecessary, so I headed west." "Do you miss them?" Olivia asked, her hands busy with mending one of his shirts. "Some days," he admitted. "Write to my mother every month. She writes back, tells me all the gossip." He glanced at Olivia. "I wrote to her about you, about us." Olivia's hands stilled. "What did you tell her?" "The truth," he said simply. "That I married a kind, brave woman who needed a partner, that I'm helping raise her child." He smiled slightly. "Left out the part about the interrupted wedding." "Figured that was our business." "What did she say?" "Said I finally showed some sense, settling down with a good woman." His smile widened. "Said she always figured I'd need someone with plenty of gumption to put up with my stubborn ways." Olivia laughed, a sound that had become more frequent in recent weeks. "She sounds wonderful." "She is," he agreed. "You'd like her." He hesitated. "Maybe someday you'll meet." The idea that their hasty marriage might have a someday stretched out before them warmed Olivia more than she expected. As June turned to July, the summer heat intensified, making Olivia's advancing pregnancy more uncomfortable. Her work at the dressmaker's provided a welcome distraction, though the walk to and from town became increasingly challenging. One particularly hot afternoon, as she made her slow way back to the ranch, a wagon pulled alongside her. She looked up, expecting to see Keegan, but instead found Richard Rosewood, the ranch owner, holding the reins. "Mrs. Elliott," he called, "allow me to give you a ride. This heat's not fit for man nor beast, let alone a lady in your condition." Gratefully, Olivia accepted his help into the wagon. As they traveled toward the ranch, Rosewood studied her with the same shrewd but not unkind expression he'd worn when they first met. "Your husband's a good man," he said finally. "Best foreman I've ever had, honest, hardworking, fair with the men." "Yes," Olivia agreed, "he is." "Not much for talking, though," Rosewood continued. 7 years working for me, and I learned more about him in the last month than all those years combined." He glanced at her. "Seems you've been good for him." "He's been good for me," Olivia replied softly. "Figured that wedding was a hasty affair," Rosewood commented, his tone carefully neutral. "But I've seen arranged marriages with less foundation turn into something solid. Time and shared purpose can build strong bonds. Yes, Olivia said, thinking of the growing ease between her and Keegan. I believe they can. As they approached the ranch, Olivia spotted Keegan in the corral, working with a young horse. His movements were patient and confident, his focus absolute. Something about watching him work this man who was her husband in name but still somewhat a stranger made her heart beat faster. He told me he plans to build on an addition to that cabin before winter, Rosewood remarked, following her gaze. For the little one, asked for an advance on his wages for lumber. He didn't tell me that, Olivia said, surprised. Probably wanted to surprise you. Rosewood pulled the wagon to a stop. You know, Mrs. Elliott, I've owned this ranch for 20 years, seen men come and go. Your husband's the kind who plants roots deep. Once he commits to something or someone, it's for keeps. The words stayed with Olivia as she thanked Rosewood for the ride and made her way to the cabin. Inside, she found the house cooler than the scorching outdoors, Keegan having left the windows open to catch the breeze. She changed into a loose house dress and began preparing vegetables for dinner, her mind on Rosewood's words and the man who was becoming increasingly important to her. When Keegan returned that evening, dusty and tired from a day of breaking horses, Olivia had dinner waiting, a stew that had been simmering all afternoon, filling the cabin with savory aromas. "Smells wonderful," he said appreciatively, washing up at the basin by the door. As they ate, Olivia found herself studying him more openly than usual, the strong line of his jaw, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled, the capable hands that were so gentle despite their strength. "Mr. Rosewood gave me a ride home today," she said finally. "He mentioned you're planning an addition to the cabin." Keegan looked up, a flash of disappointment crossing his face. "Was hoping to surprise you with that." "It's a wonderful surprise," she assured him. "I'm touched you'd go to such trouble." "Not trouble," he said with a shrug. "Baby needs space, and I thought—" he hesitated. "Thought maybe someday we might need more room if things develop between us." The careful way he approached the subject, never presuming, always patient, made Olivia's throat tight with emotion. This man who had rushed into marriage with her was otherwise the least impulsive person she'd ever known. "Keegan," she said softly, "you've been sleeping in that chair for over a month now." He looked up, eyes cautious. "It's not so bad." "It is," she countered, "and unnecessary. The bed is plenty big enough for both of us." His eyes widened slightly. "Olivia, I don't expect—" "I know you don't," she interrupted gently. "That's why I'm offering, just to sleep," she clarified, feeling her cheeks warm. "I'm not. I mean in my condition." "I understand," he said quickly, his own face flushing. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm sure." That night they lay side by side in the bed that had been his, then hers, and was now truly theirs. A careful distance separated them, but Olivia found the sound of his steady breathing comforting rather than intrusive. "Good night, Olivia," he murmured into the darkness. "Good night, Keegan," she replied, and for the first time since their hasty wedding she felt like she might truly be home. August in Nevada brought relentless heat that shimmered across the landscape in waves. Olivia's pregnancy advanced into its 7th month, her body growing heavier and more ungainly by the day. The baby was active, especially in the evenings, kicking and rolling beneath her skin with surprising strength. One night, as they prepared for bed, a routine that had become comfortable rather than awkward, she gasped as a particularly strong movement caught her by surprise. Keegan looked up from where he was removing his boots. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she assured him with a smile, "just someone making their presence known." She rubbed her hand over the spot where the baby had kicked. He nodded, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity that he quickly masked. Olivia recognized the look. She'd seen it often when the baby moved. Keegan always seemed interested but hesitant to intrude. "Would you like to feel?" she offered impulsively. His eyes widened. "I. If you're comfortable with that." "I am," she said, realizing it was true. Over the past months, Keegan had become not just her protector but her friend. The careful distance they maintained in bed each night had not prevented a different kind of intimacy from growing between them, one built on shared meals, quiet conversations, and the gradual intertwining of their lives. She took his hand calloused from years of ranch work and placed it on the swell of her belly. For a moment, nothing happened and she worried the baby had settled. Then came a firm kick directly against Keegan's palm, his face transformed with wonder. "That's your child," she said softly, the words surprising them both. His eyes met hers, something profound passing between them. "Our child," he corrected gently. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement, and they shared a laugh that dispelled the intensity of the moment. Yet something had shifted, some boundary crossed that could not be uncrossed. That night, they lay closer than they had before, not touching but near enough that Olivia could feel the warmth radiating from his body. She slept better than she had in weeks. The following day, Olivia was at the dressmaker's shop, carefully hemming a dress for the banker's wife, when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see Jeremiah Blackburn's mother, Agatha, entering the shop. The older woman stopped short at the sight of Olivia, her face hardening into lines of disapproval. "Mrs. Henderson," Agatha said coolly, ignoring Olivia completely. "I've come to collect my dress for the harvest dance." Mrs. Henderson emerged from the back room, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course, Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Elliott has just finished the alterations to the bodice. Would you like to try it on to ensure the fit is correct?" Agatha's eyes darted to Olivia, then away. "I'm certain it will be fine." "Nevertheless, Mrs. Henderson insisted pleasantly, "I do require a final fitting. The changing room is ready for you." With obvious reluctance, Agatha took the dress, a handsome blue silk with ivory trim, and disappeared behind the curtain. When she emerged, Olivia had to admit the dress was flattering to the older woman's still elegant figure. "Mrs. Elliott," Mrs. Henderson called, "would you check the hem, please? I want to be sure it's even all around." It was a deliberate move, forcing interaction between the two women. Olivia approached carefully, kneeling awkwardly to examine the hem. Her pregnant belly made the position difficult, but she managed, focusing on the task rather than the woman wearing the dress. "It's hanging a bit low on the right side," she said professionally. "I can pin it now and have it adjusted within the hour." Agatha stiffened. "That won't be necessary. I'll take it as is." "Mrs. Blackburn," Mrs. Henderson said firmly, "my shop has a reputation for perfection. I insist on the adjustment." With a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, Agatha submitted to Olivia's ministrations. As Olivia carefully pinned the hem, Agatha finally spoke directly to her. "I understand you've found employment here despite your situation, Mrs. Henderson has been very kind," Olivia replied evenly, keeping her eyes on her work. "Yes, well, not everyone in Verdi shares her progressive views." Agatha's voice dripped with disdain. "My son has been humiliated, you know, the spectacle at the church, the rumors." Olivia's fingers trembled slightly, but she continued pinning. "I believe the humiliation was mutual, Mrs. Blackburn. He says the child isn't his." "He's lying," Olivia said simply, finally looking up to meet the older woman's gaze. "But it hardly matters now. This child will be raised by a good man who has chosen to be its father. Your son made his choice that day in the church. Something flickered in Agatha's eyes, perhaps surprise at Olivia's calm assurance. "That cowboy. He's treating you well." The question seemed to contain genuine curiosity beneath the hostility. "My husband," Olivia emphasized the word, "treats me with more respect and kindness than I knew was possible." Before Agatha could respond, the shop door opened again, and Keegan himself entered. He removed his hat, nodding politely to the room. "Ladies." "Mr. Elliott," Mrs. Henderson greeted him warmly. "What brings you to town in the middle of the day? Lumber delivery for the addition," he explained. "Thought I'd stop by and see if my wife might like a ride home later. The heat's fierce today." His eyes found Olivia kneeling on the floor, pins in her mouth, and then traveled to Agatha Blackburn standing rigidly in her half-altered dress. Something hardened in his expression, but his voice remained courteous. "Mrs. Blackburn," he acknowledged with a tip of his head. "Mr. Elliott," she returned stiffly. An awkward silence fell. Olivia quickly placed the last pin and struggled to her feet. Keegan was beside her instantly, his hand at her elbow, helping her rise with gentle strength. "Thank you," she murmured, acutely aware of Agatha watching their interaction. "A ride home would be wonderful," she told him. "I just need to finish Mrs. Blackburn's alterations." "I'll wait," he said simply. As Agatha changed back into her regular clothes, Olivia took the dress to her workstation and began the quick but precise work of adjusting the hem. Keegan settled into a chair near the door, his hat on his knee, his presence a comforting anchor in the tense atmosphere. When Agatha emerged, she approached the counter to pay, studiously avoiding looking at either Olivia or Keegan. But as she turned to leave, she paused. "Mrs. Elliott," she said formally, "the dress is well done, thank you." It wasn't an apology or an acceptance, but it was something. Olivia nodded in acknowledgement. "You're welcome, Mrs. Blackburn. You'll look lovely at the dance." After Agatha left, Mrs. Henderson chuckled softly. "Well now, that's progress of a sort. A month ago she was telling anyone who'd listen that you were—" She stopped, glancing at Keegan. "Well, never mind what she was saying." "I can imagine," Olivia said dryly. "Folks come around," Mrs. Henderson said, patting Olivia's hand. "Some slower than others, but they do. You two are building a respectable life. That counts for something in a place like Verdi." As they rode home later, Keegan's strong presence beside her on the wagon seat, Olivia reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The shame and fear that had consumed her on her first wedding day had gradually been replaced by something steadier, not the wild passion she'd mistaken for love with Jeremiah, but a deeper, growing affection for this quiet man who had risked everything to give her a new beginning. "Penny for your thoughts," Keegan said, breaking into her reverie. She smiled. "I was just thinking how different my life is from what I expected when I came to Nevada." "Better or worse?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in the question. Olivia considered the journey that had brought her here, the grief of losing her mother, the desperate loneliness that had made her susceptible to Jeremiah's empty promises, the humiliation at the church, and then the unexpected salvation offered by the man beside her. "Different," she said finally, "but increasingly better." His hand found hers on the seat between them, rough fingers gently enfolding her smaller ones. It was a small gesture, but in the context of their careful relationship, it felt significant. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they developed to catch the cooler air before bedtime, Keegan pointed to the framework rising beside the cabin. "Additions coming along," he said. "Should have it closed in before the first snow." "It's going to be wonderful," Olivia said sincerely, "though I feel guilty about the expense." He shook his head. "Don't been saving for years with no purpose. This is the best use I could make of it." "Still," she insisted, I want to contribute. The pay from the dressmakers isn't much, but it's your money, he interrupted gently. For whatever you need or want, I know you don't expect, she said, finding herself suddenly frustrated with his careful consideration. That's just it, Keegan. You never expect anything. You gave me your name, your home, your bed. You're building an addition for a child that isn't yours by blood. You're taking on all the responsibilities of a husband and father without. She trailed off, suddenly embarrassed. Without the benefits, he finished softly. She flushed. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant, you're giving so much and asking so little in return. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the darkening horizon. What if I did ask for more? He said finally, his voice low. What if I told you that sharing a bed with you every night, being close enough to hear your breathing but not reaching for you, is the sweetest torture I've ever endured? Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Keegan. I meant what I said that day in the church, he continued, still not looking at her. I admired you for months before all this, watched you from afar, too shy or too proud to approach properly. When I saw Jeremiah courting you, I thought I'd lost my chance. He turned to her then, his blue eyes intent in the fading light. I never expected to get a second one, and I won't rush you or pressure you. But don't think for a moment that I don't want more, Olivia. I do. I want everything a marriage can be with you. The raw honesty in his voice stole her breath. For months, he had been careful not to burden her with his desires, letting her set the pace of their relationship. Now, with simple words, he had laid his heart bare. Before she could think better of it, Olivia leaned across the space between their chairs and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, almost chaste, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide with surprise and something deeper, more primal. Olivia, he breathed. I want more too, she whispered. I'm just afraid. Of what? He asked, taking her hand in his. Of being wrong again, she admitted. With Jeremiah, I thought what I felt was love. I was so certain, and I was so terribly wrong. Keegan's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. What we're building is different, he said. It started with respect, not passion, with choice, not impulse. His eyes held hers. I think that's a stronger foundation, she nodded slowly. I think so too. They sat in silence as darkness settled over the ranch, their hands still joined between them. Something had changed, a door opened that had been only partially ajar before. Whether they would step through it tonight or in the days to come remained to be seen, but the possibility hung in the air between them, rich with promise. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, the routine familiar yet charged with new awareness, Keegan moved deliberately to his side of the bed. As always, he maintained the careful space between them as they settled beneath the sheets. But this time, in the darkness, Olivia reached across that divide and found his hand. His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong, and they fell asleep that way, not yet fully united, but no longer quite so separate. September brought the first hints of autumn to Nevada territory, the scorching heat gradually yielding to crisp mornings and golden afternoons. The addition to the cabin progressed steadily, the frame now fully enclosed, windows installed, only the interior work remaining. Olivia had begun gathering fabrics for curtains, and a small quilt for the cradle Keegan was building in his spare time. Her pregnancy had entered its final weeks, her belly so pronounced now that she could barely see her feet. Mrs. Henderson had kindly reduced her hours at the shop, allowing her more time to rest and prepare for the baby's arrival. The change in her relationship with Keegan continued to unfold gradually. The hand-holding that had begun that night on the porch had expanded to include brief kisses, lingering embraces, and sleeping curled together, rather than separated by that careful distance. They had not yet consummated their marriage, both agreeing that her advanced pregnancy made waiting the wiser choice, but the promise of that future intimacy hovered between them, making even simple touches electric. One crisp morning in late September, Olivia woke to an unfamiliar sensation, a low, dull ache in her lower back. She shifted uncomfortably, trying not to wake Keegan, who had worked late the night before and was still sleeping deeply beside her. The pain subsided, and she carefully rose from bed to begin her morning routine. By midday, the backache had returned, now accompanied by occasional tightening sensations across her abdomen. Olivia paused in her work on the baby's quilt, one hand pressed to her belly as realization dawned. These weren't just aches and pains, they were the beginning signs of labor. Keegan was out with the herd, not expected back until evening. Olivia moved carefully around the cabin, finishing the preparations she'd been making for the baby's arrival. She laid out the tiny gowns she'd sewn, checked that the cradle was ready beside their bed, and packed a small bag with necessities for herself. Dr. Collins, Verdi's aging physician, had examined her just the week before and pronounced her healthy and well prepared for delivery. "Send for me when the pains come regular," he'd instructed. "First babies often take their time, so no need to rush." As the afternoon wore on, the pains grew stronger and more rhythmic. Olivia paced the cabin, pausing to breathe through each contraction. She wasn't afraid. Her mother had been a midwife back in Pennsylvania, and Olivia had assisted with enough births to understand the process. But she hadn't expected to be alone when it began. By the time she heard Keegan's horse in the yard, the sun was setting and the contractions were coming steadily, about 15 minutes apart. She met him at the door, one hand braced against the frame. "Olivia." His eyes widened as he took in her appearance. "Is it time?" She nodded, managing a smile despite the discomfort. "I think our little one has decided to arrive early." In an instant, his expression shifted from surprise to focused determination. "What do you need me to do?" Send one of the ranch hands for Dr. Collins, she said, breathing through another contraction. "And then just stay with me." Keegan moved with efficient purpose, issuing instructions to a young ranch hand who immediately mounted up and rode for town. He returned to find Olivia leaning against the kitchen table, face contorted in pain. Without hesitation, he moved behind her, his strong hands finding the aching spots in her lower back and applying gentle pressure. "My sister-in-law swore this helped when she was birthing my nephew," he explained. The relief was immediate and substantial. "Your sister-in-law was right," Olivia sighed. "That's wonderful." For the next few hours, they moved together in an intimate dance of pain and relief. Keegan never left her side, supporting her as she walked, kneeled, or leaned against him, his quiet strength an anchor as the contractions grew stronger and closer together. Dr. Collins arrived as night was falling fully, bringing with him his medical bag and decades of experience. He examined Olivia efficiently, nodding with satisfaction. "Everything's progressing normally," he assured them. "The baby's in the right position and you're dilating well. Now we wait." The labor continued through the night, Olivia moving between the bed and a chair by the fire as her body directed. Keegan remained steadfast beside her, wiping her brow with cool cloths, supporting her weight during the worst contractions, murmuring encouragement when her strength flagged. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her as dawn approached and her labor intensified. "You can do this, Olivia. Our child is almost here. Our child." The words gave her courage, reminding her that whatever the circumstances of conception, this baby would be born into love. Just as the first light of morning filtered through the windows, Dr. Collins announced it was time to push. Keegan positioned himself behind Olivia on the bed, supporting her back as she bore down with each contraction. "I can see the head," Dr. Collins announced after several pushes. "Dark hair like its mama." Tears filled Olivia's eyes at the news. One more push than another, and suddenly the room filled with the indignant cry of a newborn. "It's a boy," Dr. Collins announced, placing the squalling infant on Olivia's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Olivia gazed down at the red-faced, dark-haired miracle in her arms. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." She felt Keegan's arms around them both, heard the catch in his breath as he looked at the child, their child now, in every way that mattered. "He's perfect," Keegan said, his voice rough with emotion. As Dr. Collins busied himself with the afterbirth and other necessities, Olivia turned her head to look at her husband. His eyes were fixed on the baby, wonder and love plain in his expression. "What shall we name him?" she asked softly. Keegan looked surprised. "I assumed you'd already chosen a name." She shook her head. "I wanted to decide together." His eyes filled with emotion at the gesture of inclusion. "My father's name was Thomas," he offered tentatively. "Thomas," Olivia repeated, looking down at the now quieting infant. "Thomas Elliott, it suits him." "What about a middle name?" Keegan asked. "Perhaps after your father, James," she said softly. "His name was James." "Thomas James Elliott," Keegan said, trying the name. "Strong name for a strong boy." As the morning light strengthened, bathing the small family in golden warmth, Dr. Collins finished his work and prepared to leave. "Everything looks excellent," he assured them. "Mother and child both healthy. Rest now, Mrs. Elliott. Your body's done remarkable work today." After the doctor left, Keegan helped Olivia settle more comfortably in bed, the baby swaddled and sleeping in the crook of her arm. He moved to step away, but she caught his hand. "Stay," she said simply. Carefully, he sat on the edge of the bed beside her, his eyes never leaving the tiny face of their son. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted quietly. "A wife, a child, a family of my own." "Nor did I," Olivia replied. "Not after everything that happened." She looked up at him, her heart full. "Thank you, Keegan, for stopping that wedding, for offering me your name, for loving a child that isn't yours by blood." "He is mine," Keegan said with quiet certainty. "From this day forward, he is mine in every way that matters." He reached out, gently touching Thomas's tiny hand with one finger. The baby reflexively grasped it, his entire hand barely encircling Keegan's fingertip. Something shifted in Olivia's heart as she watched them, the man who had chosen to be her husband and the son who would never know any father but him. The complicated circumstances that had brought them together seemed to fall away, leaving only this simple truth: they were a family. "I love you," she said, the words coming naturally without fear or hesitation. Keegan's eyes met hers, bright with emotion. "I've loved you since the first time I saw you helping old Mrs. Talbot find just the right fabric for her granddaughter's dress. So patient, so kind." He leaned down and kissed her gently. "And I'll love you for all the days I have left." Thomas stirred between them, making tiny newborn sounds that drew their attention back to him. Together, they marveled at his perfect features, counting fingers and toes, noting the shape of his eyes like Olivia's and the strong line of his jaw, perhaps a hint of Jeremiah, though neither acknowledged it. "Welcome to the world, Thomas James Elliott," Keegan whispered. "You have a mother brave as a lioness and a father who will always protect you both." Exhausted but deeply content, Olivia drifted to sleep with her son in her arms and her husband keeping watch beside them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, an unlikely family forged not from convention but from choice, compassion, and growing love. The weeks following Thomas's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights, tender moments, and the countless adjustments required by a new baby. Keegan proved himself an eager, if sometimes uncertain father, initially handling Thomas as if he might break at the slightest touch, but gradually growing more confident. "You're a natural," Olivia told him one evening as she watched him walk the colicky infant around the cabin, Thomas's tiny body cradled securely against his broad chest. Keegan smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Not sure about that, but I'm learning." The addition to the cabin was completed by the time Thomas was 3 weeks old, a snug nursery connected to the main bedroom, with a window facing east to catch the morning sun. Olivia had sewn cheerful yellow curtains and a matching quilt for the cradle Keegan had crafted. "It's perfect," she declared when the last touch, a small bookshelf for future bedtime stories, was installed. "He won't use it right away," Keegan acknowledged, looking around the little room with satisfaction, "but he'll grow into it." The first real test of their new family came when Thomas was just over a month old. Olivia had ventured into town for the first time since the birth, bringing the baby to meet Mrs. Henderson and pick up some supplies they needed. She was crossing the street toward the general store when she spotted Jeremiah Blackburn emerging from the saloon. For a moment, she froze, instinctively clutching Thomas closer. Jeremiah saw her at the same instant, his steps faltering. For several heartbeats, they stared at each other across the dusty street, Olivia with the infant that was biologically his, Jeremiah with the knowledge of what he had rejected. Then, to Olivia's surprise, he approached. She tensed but stood her ground, one hand protectively cradling Thomas's head. "Mrs. Elliott," Jeremiah said formally, stopping a respectful distance away. His eyes dropped to the bundle in her arms. "This is your son." "Yes," she replied simply. "Thomas." Something flickered across Jeremiah's face, regret perhaps, or simple curiosity. "May I see him?" After a moment's hesitation, Olivia adjusted the blanket to reveal Thomas's sleeping face. Jeremiah studied the infant, his expression unreadable. "He's a fine-looking boy," he said finally. "Healthy." "Very," Olivia confirmed. An awkward silence fell between them. Jeremiah shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I heard Elliott's been treating you well." "My husband is a good man," she said, emphasizing the relationship deliberately. Jeremiah nodded, something like embarrassment crossing his features. I behaved badly that day at the church." "The things I said." He trailed off, then straightened. "I apologize for that, Mrs. Elliott. It was ungentlemanly." The apology surprised her so long after the fact. "Thank you," she said simply. "My mother," Jeremiah continued awkwardly, "she's been. Well, she wanted me to tell you that if you ever need anything for the boy, we don't." Olivia interrupted firmly but not unkindly. "Thomas has everything he needs." "Right," Jeremiah said, stepping back. "Of course. Well, good day, Mrs. Elliott." As he walked away, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders, not forgiveness, exactly, but a release. The anger and humiliation that had lingered from that day at the church seemed to dissipate, leaving only gratitude for how things had ultimately unfolded. That evening, as she recounted the encounter to Keegan, she was surprised to see his jaw tighten with suppressed anger. "He had no right to approach you," Keegan said, his voice low to avoid waking Thomas, who was sleeping in his cradle beside them. "No right to look at our son." "He's not a threat anymore," Olivia assured him, touched by his protectiveness. "And in a strange way, I'm grateful for what happened that day. If Jeremiah hadn't revealed his true nature at the church." She reached for Keegan's hand. "I wouldn't be here with you now." His expression softened. "Still, if he ever makes you uncomfortable again, I'll tell you immediately," she promised. "But I don't think he will." He seemed chastened somehow. Keegan nodded reluctantly, then changed the subject. Rosewood came by today while you were in town, offered me a promotion. His ranch manager is retiring, moving back east to be with his daughter. Keegan, that's wonderful, Olivia exclaimed. Did you accept? Told him I needed to discuss it with my wife first, he said with a small smile. It means more responsibility, longer hours sometimes, but also more pay and a share in the ranch's profits. Of course you should take it, Olivia said without hesitation. You've earned it. He studied her face. You're sure, with Thomas still so young? I'm sure, she said firmly. We're managing well, and this is an opportunity you deserve. He squeezed her hand gratefully, then hesitated. There's something else. The position comes with the right to live in the manager's house. The main house? Olivia asked, surprised. No, not the Rosewood place. There's another house closer to the east pasture, bigger than our cabin. 3 bedrooms, proper kitchen, sitting room. It needs some work, been empty a while, but it would give us more space. That sounds wonderful, Olivia said, though a part of her felt a pang at the thought of leaving the small cabin where they had become a family. When would we move? Not until spring if we decide to, Keegan assured her. The current manager won't leave until then, and the house needs repairs before winter. He gazed around their cozy cabin. And I know you're comfortable here. Home isn't about the building, Olivia said softly. It's about the people. His eyes met hers, warm with affection. When did you get so wise, Mrs. Elliott? Oh, somewhere between getting abandoned at the altar and having a baby, I suppose, she teased, leaning in to kiss him lightly. The kiss deepened unexpectedly, Keegan's hand coming up to cradle her face with exquisite gentleness. In the weeks since Thomas's birth, their physical relationship had remained affectionate but restrained, both of them aware of her body's need to heal. I've missed you, he murmured against her lips. I'm right here, she whispered back. You know what I mean, he said, drawing back slightly to search her face. But there's no rush. When you're ready, if you're ready. In answer, Olivia kissed him again, more boldly this time. Doctor. Collins said 6 weeks, she reminded him. It's been 5, close enough, I think. His eyes darkened. Are you sure? I'm sure, she said, suddenly certain. This man had given her his name, his protection, his heart, all without asking anything in return. I want to truly be your wife, Keegan. In every way. That night, for the first time, they came together as husband and wife, their union tender and reverent. Afterward, Olivia lay in his arms, their bodies still joined, and felt the final pieces of her heart fall into place. I never thought I could feel this way, she confessed softly. After everything with Jeremiah, I was so afraid to trust again. And now, Keegan asked, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her bare skin. Now I know what love truly is, she said simply. Not grand gestures or pretty words, but this standing beside me when I needed someone most, being patient when I was afraid, loving a child as your own. She raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes. You're the best man I've ever known, Keegan Elliott. His eyes shone in the dim light. And you, Olivia Elliott, are the strongest, most beautiful woman in the world. In the cradle beside their bed, Thomas stirred and whimpered. Both parents turned toward the sound, smiling. Your son has excellent timing, Keegan teased as Olivia slipped from bed to tend to the baby. Our son, she corrected gently, lifting Thomas to her breast. Always our son. As winter descended on Nevada territory, bringing snow to the mountains and cold winds sweeping across the valleys, the Elliott family settled into a rhythm of domestic contentment. The cabin, small as it was, felt warm and secure against the elements, a haven of love in the harshness of the frontier. Christmas approached, bringing with it Keegan's first opportunity for extended time away from his ranch duties. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside, They sat before the fire with Thomas, now nearly 3 months old and growing rapidly. "I have something for you," Keegan said, reaching beneath the small pine tree they had decorated with paper stars and dried berries. "It's not much, but—" He handed Olivia a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, she found a locket simple but elegant, with a delicate floral pattern etched into the silver surface. "It's beautiful," she breathed, opening it to find it empty. "I thought we could put a lock of Thomas's hair inside," Keegan explained. "And maybe, someday, another child's as well." Olivia looked up sharply. "Another child," he smiled, a touch sheepishly. "If you wanted, someday, not right away, of course, but—" "I'd like that," she said softly. "Very much." His smile broadened. "Really, really," she confirmed. "I always wanted a large family. My mother was an only child, and she always said it was lonely." "How many is large?" Keegan asked, looking both pleased and slightly alarmed. Olivia laughed. "I don't know, 2, 3. We have time to decide." She reached beneath the tree for her gift to him, a new leather-bound journal to replace the tattered one he used to record ranch business, along with a fine pen she'd ordered specially from Carson City. "Now you can write down all your brilliant ideas for the ranch," she teased as he ran his fingers over the smooth leather. "Or my thoughts about my beautiful wife and son," he countered, leaning in to kiss her. Thomas cooed from his basket beside them, drawing their attention. His eyes were beginning to change from newborn blue to a shade closer to Olivia's hazel, and his dark hair had a slight wave to it. "I think he wants his present too," Olivia said with a smile. Keegan reached once more beneath the tree, bringing out a small wooden horse he had carved himself. It was simple but lovingly crafted, sanded smooth to be safe for little hands. "He's too young to play with it now," Keegan acknowledged, "but he'll grow into it." "It's perfect," Olivia assured him, touched by the gesture. Later, after Thomas had been fed and settled in his cradle, they lay together in their bed, listening to the wind whistle around the eaves of the cabin. "I never thought I could be this happy," Keegan admitted quietly. "When I rode into that church that day, I was so angry at Jeremiah, at everyone watching and not stopping him. I just wanted to help you escape the humiliation." He turned to face her in the darkness. "I never imagined I'd find everything I never knew I wanted. Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked, a rare moment of insecurity surfacing. "Marrying a pregnant woman you barely knew? Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "Even if you never grew to love me, I would still count that day as the luckiest of my life." She curled closer to him, resting her head on his chest. "I do love you, more than I thought possible." As winter gave way to spring and Thomas grew from infant to active baby, Keegan began preparations for their move to the ranch manager's house. He spent his spare hours repairing the roof, replacing broken windows, and rebuilding the porch that had collapsed under heavy snow years before. Olivia visited the house for the first time in early April. Thomas balanced on her hip as Keegan proudly showed them around. It was indeed larger than their cabin, a proper family home with space to grow. "What do you think?" Keegan asked anxiously as they stood in what would be their bedroom, a large space with windows that caught the afternoon light. "It's wonderful," Olivia said sincerely, trying to imagine their life in these rooms. "A fresh start." "Not a fresh start," Keegan corrected gently. "A continuation. The next chapter." By May, the house was ready, and they made the move on a perfect spring day, the ranch hands helping transport their modest belongings from the cabin. Mrs. Rosewood herself came to welcome them, bringing a basket of fresh bread, preserves, and a bottle of wine. "It's tradition," she explained when Keegan tried to thank her. "We've always welcomed new managers this way." She smiled at Olivia and Thomas. Besides, it's a pleasure to have a young family on the ranch again. The place needs children's laughter. That evening, after Thomas had been put to bed in his new nursery, Keegan and Olivia sat on their rebuilt porch, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant hues. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Very," she confirmed, leaning into his strength. "Though I'll miss our little cabin." "We'll keep it," Keegan promised. "For guests, maybe, or for the older boys when they need some independence." "Boys, plural?" Olivia asked, raising an eyebrow. "You sound very certain about that," he laughed. "Just hoping." "Though daughters would be wonderful too." Olivia bit her lip, a secret smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well, we'll find out in about 7 months which it will be." Keegan went very still beside her. "Olivia," he breathed. She turned to him, eyes shining. "I'm pregnant, Keegan, doctor." Collins confirmed it yesterday. For a moment, he simply stared at her, processing the news. Then, with a whoop that surely could be heard all the way to the main house, he swept her up into his arms, spinning her around on the porch. "Careful," she laughed. "I'm in a delicate condition, remember." He set her down immediately, his face a picture of contrition. "I'm sorry, I just were having a baby." Then his expression changed to one of pure wonder. "A baby, our baby." "Our baby," Olivia confirmed softly, understanding the significance. This child would be theirs in every sense, conceived in love, born of their union. Not that it would make any difference in how they loved Thomas, but there was something profound about creating a life together. Keegan dropped to his knees before her, pressing his face gently against her still flat abdomen. "Hello in there, little one," he murmured. "I'm your pa and I can't wait to meet you." Olivia stroked his hair, her heart so full it felt it might burst. From abandoned bride to beloved wife and mother in less than a year, a journey she could never have imagined that day in the church when her world seemed to be ending. "I love you," she whispered. "Both of you. All of you." Keegan rose to his feet, gathering her in his arms. "And I love you, Olivia Elliott, from that first day and for all the days to come." As they stood together on the porch of their new home, the stars beginning to emerge in the vast Nevada sky, Olivia thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. A wedding interrupted, a desperate proposal, a leap of faith, all leading to a love deeper and truer than any she could have dreamed. In December of 1876, on a crisp winter morning with snow dusting the Nevada mountains, Olivia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara Rose Elliott, with Keegan's blue eyes and a dusting of red gold hair that surprised them both. "Must be from my grandmother," Keegan said in wonder, cradling the tiny infant. "She had hair like fire, according to my mother." Thomas, now a sturdy, curious 15-month-old, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to touch her hair and hold her tiny hands. Under Keegan's watchful eye, he was allowed brief moments to hold the baby, his small face solemn with the responsibility. "Be gentle with your sister, Thomas," Keegan instructed, his hands never far from the baby. "You're her big brother now." The sight of her family together, Keegan patient and loving, Thomas earnest in his new role, Clara content in her brother's awkward embrace, filled Olivia's heart with a joy so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Life as the ranch manager's wife suited Olivia. She had begun taking in fine sewing from the wealthier families in Verde, working from home so she could care for the children. Her reputation for exquisite needlework had spread, and she now had more commissions than she could comfortably accept. Keegan thrived in his new position, respected by the ranch hands and trusted implicitly by Mr. Rosewood. Under his management, the Triple R expanded its operations, increasing its cattle herd and adding several new pastures to its holdings. Their home grew along with their prosperity, a chicken coop behind the house, a vegetable garden that expanded each year, new curtains and rugs that made the once neglected house a true home. They had even added a piano, a luxury Olivia had never expected to own, delivered all the way from San Francisco as Keegan's surprise for their second anniversary. "You mentioned once that you played as a girl," he explained as she stared at the instrument in disbelief. "I thought you might like to teach the children someday." The fact that he listened, that he remembered such a small detail from one of their many conversations, was just one of the countless ways he showed his love. As the years passed, their family continued to grow. William James Elliott arrived in the spring of 1879, another boy with Keegan's quiet demeanor and Olivia's thoughtful eyes. When their fourth child, Robert Daniel Elliott, was born in 1881, Keegan joked that they were well on their way to having enough children to staff their own ranch. "I wouldn't mind a few more," Olivia teased as they lay together one night, the house quiet with all four children finally asleep. "A few," Keegan laughed softly. "Woman, you'll be the death of me." "But what a way to go," she whispered, pressing closer to him in the darkness. By the time their fifth child and third daughter, Elizabeth Mee Elliott, was born in 1883, they had purchased a small parcel of land adjacent to the Triple R. Though Keegan continued as ranch manager, they had begun building their own herd, planning for a future when their sons might want to work their own land. Through it all, the joys and challenges of raising a growing family, the inevitable hardships of life on the frontier, their partnership remained strong, founded on that impulsive decision in a church in Verdi, and strengthened by years of shared purpose and deepening love. In the summer of 1890, 15 years after that fateful wedding day, Olivia stood on the porch of their home, watching as Keegan taught 17-year-old Thomas to break a spirited young horse. The boy, nearly a man now, had his mother's coloring, but moved with Keegan's confident grace in the saddle. Clara, at 14, sat nearby sketching the scene, her red gold hair gleaming in the sunlight. William and Robert, 11 and 9, were supposed to be doing their chores but had stopped to watch the exciting work with the horse. 7-year-old Elizabeth sat at Olivia's feet, carefully sewing a doll's dress with serious concentration. And in Olivia's arms, 3-month-old Joseph Matthew Elliott, their surprise final blessing, slept peacefully, unaware of his boisterous family around him. "Mama," Elizabeth said, looking up from her needlework, "tell me again about how you and Papa met." Olivia smiled, having told the story many times over the years, always carefully edited for younger ears. "Well, I was about to marry another man, but your father interrupted the wedding." "Because the other man was mean," Elizabeth supplied knowingly. "Yes," Olivia agreed. "He wasn't a good man, and your father saved me by offering to marry me himself. Even though you were already carrying Thomas in your tummy," Elizabeth added matter-of-factly. Olivia nodded. The children all knew that Thomas had been born very soon after the wedding, though only Clara, as she grew older, had fully understood the implications and asked more detailed questions. Keegan had been the one to explain to her with simple honesty that while he had not given Thomas life, he had chosen to be his father in every way that mattered. "Was it love at first sight?" Elizabeth asked dreamily. "Like in the storybooks?" Olivia considered the question, watching as Keegan dismounted to help Thomas adjust his position on the nervous colt. "Not exactly," she said truthfully. "It was something better, something stronger." "What could be stronger than love at first sight?" Elizabeth asked, her 7-year-old logic puzzled. "Love that grows," Olivia explained. "Love that builds day by day through hard times and good times. Love that chooses again and again." Elizabeth frowned thoughtfully, processing this less romantic but more substantial vision. I think I'd still rather have love at first sight, she decided finally. It seems more exciting. Olivia laughed, shifting baby Joseph to her other arm. You might change your mind when you're older. Across the yard, Keegan looked up at the sound of her laughter, his face breaking into that same smile that had transformed him from stranger to savior on that long-ago day in the church. Even now, after 15 years of marriage and 6 children, that smile could make her heart skip. He said something to Thomas, then crossed the yard to join them on the porch, his boots leaving dusty prints on the steps. "What's so amusing?" he asked, kissing her lightly before taking Joseph from her arms. "Elizabeth thinks our love story isn't romantic enough," Olivia explained. "She prefers love at first sight." "Ah," Keegan said seriously, settling the baby more comfortably against his shoulder. "Well, Elizabeth, I should tell you that it was love at first sight for me." "Really?" Elizabeth's eyes widened in delight. "Truly," he confirmed. "The first time I saw your mother in the general store, helping old Mrs. Talbot find just the right ribbon for her granddaughter's bonnet, I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen." "Then why didn't you marry her right then?" Elizabeth demanded. Keegan laughed. "Because I was shy, and your mother didn't even know I existed. Sometimes love at first sight needs a little help from fate." "Like the bad man at the wedding," Elizabeth nodded wisely. "Exactly," Keegan agreed, winking at Olivia over their daughter's head. As the sun began to set over the Nevada mountains, casting long shadows across the ranch they had built together, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that humiliating day at the altar, through the uncertainty of their hasty marriage, to this moment of contentment surrounded by their children, it had been a path she could never have foreseen but would never wish to change. Later that night, with the children all asleep and the house quiet around them, Olivia and Keegan stood together at their bedroom window, looking out at the stars scattered across the vast western sky. "Any regrets?" Keegan asked softly, his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Not one," she replied without hesitation. "Only that I didn't speak to you sooner," he said. "We might have had even more years together." She turned in his arms to face him. At 43, his hair was beginning to silver at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. But to Olivia, he was more handsome than ever, his face now a map of their shared life, every line a story they had written together. "We have all the years ahead," she reminded him. "And 6 beautiful children to show for the ones behind." 7, he corrected, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "If I'm not mistaken." Olivia's eyes widened. "How did you know? I only just began to suspect myself." He smiled, that same transformative smile that had first given her hope in her darkest hour. "You get a certain glow about you. I've seen it 6 times now. I'd know it anywhere." "Are you disappointed?" she asked. "We thought Joseph would be our last." "Disappointed?" Keegan shook his head in wonder. "Olivia Elliott, how could I ever be disappointed by another child with you? Another piece of our love in the world." She rose on tiptoes to kiss him, this man who had changed her life with a single act of courage and compassion. "I love you, Keegan Elliott," she whispered against his lips. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "And I love you," he replied, his arms tightening around her. "From that first day in the church, through all the days between and for all the days to come." In the soft darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by the home they had built and the family they had created, Olivia reflected on how a moment of deepest humiliation had led to a lifetime of profound joy. The pregnant bride, mocked at the altar, had found not just rescue but redemption in the arms of a quiet cowboy brave enough to stop a wedding and offer his heart instead. It wasn't the love story she had dreamed of as a girl, but as she had told Elizabeth, it was something better. something stronger. A love built choice by choice, day by day, year by year, as enduring as the mountains that surrounded their home and as boundless as the western sky above it.